And so he gives us these examples one after another. Each one of them is beautiful, and each one of them is incredibly challenging to actually live out. The first one he says is Matthew 5:39. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. Now, what is Jesus really saying as he's saying this? He's turn the cheek is really what he's really saying is that you should absorb an offense. Don't be offended. Don't let yourself be so offended. Jesus didn't seem to get offended by anything, did he? Now, there is a cultural dynamic at this time that is important to understand, because I think sometimes we read this and we miss what Jesus was really saying. See, for most people who are right-handed, whenever you would slap them on the left cheek, what that really was a sense, a way of utter disrespect for the other person. It was a public humiliation. Whenever you slap someone like this with the back of your hand, it was basically like you saying, "You are beneath me." I mean, that was really what that meant. And so what Jesus was saying here is he was not asking victims to endure abuse. What he was really trying to speak to, he was not saying like, just let people beat you up. What he was really saying is like, don't let anyone take the dignity from you. Don't anyone take your identity. Don't anyone tell you who you are or that they're beneath you. And this was Jesus' statement. You don't have to retaliate in this situation. Don't let anyone else in their actions or by their words define your worth. The only person that can define your worth is God. God says who you are, whose you are, and what you're worth. And so you don't have to strike back. You don't have to match their tone. You don't have to strike back at them because your value comes from something else. And then Jesus goes on in Matthew 5:40, he says this, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your cloak as well. This makes no sense, but what Jesus was saying is give your cloak means like, hey, let go of your rights. Let go of your rights. Allow God to defend you. See, again, a little context here. In Jewish law, the cloak was completely off limits. I mean, you could sue people for things, but at the end of the day, you couldn't really take someone's cloak because the cloak was it was needed for their protection, that they could go out into the weather and into the environment and it would be protection for them. So if you sued them, you really couldn't sue them for their cloak. It was your right to keep your cloak. That was something that you just had as your personal right. But Jesus is saying like, hey, I know that's your right, but let it go anyway. Why? Because Jesus is saying, don't trust that man is going to provide for you your protection. Trust that God is going to provide your protection and your cover. God is your source. Allow God to be your source. God is going to cover you. And then Jesus continues on, and maybe the strongest example of them is Matthew 5:41 says this, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. In other words, go the extra mile means choose unexpected grace, even in the face of someone doing something to you that seems completely unfair. Now, this one would have hit a nerve. I mean, this was the exact opposite in a way of what Jewish people would have wanted to hear at this time. See, because under Roman law, Roman soldiers could force Jewish people, or really any citizen, to carry all of their equipment to be a Roman soldier, their pack, their sword, their weapons, and it was heavy. It was like 60 to 100 pounds. They could force them legally to carry that for them for 1 mile. And this was not a request. It wasn't like, hey, if you feel like it, carry this pack with me, walk with me for 1 mile down this path. This was the law. It was an expectation. And if you resisted this, you could be beaten or even arrested in this situation. And so the soldiers, I mean, they would kind of abuse this, you can imagine. They were not asking Jewish people, Roman soldiers were not asking Jewish people nicely, hey, if you would, it would be really nice for you to carry my pack. No, they looked at them with contempt, with disrespect, and they kind of had a power that they would lord over the people. And so just imagine with me for a moment what it might have been like to be a first century Jewish person, and you're walking down the path. You're trying to get food for your family. You have some things that you have some errands to run. You're trying to get to your job, whatever. You've got something going on. And all of a sudden you see a soldier in the distance and he points to you. And suddenly you have no choice. You have to pick up his pack and walk with this soldier who really is the one oppressing you in the first place. I mean, and oftentimes, it would be like 90 degrees. It'd be the sun is scorching. The pack is digging into your shoulders. Your muscles are aching, right? You're sweating and sweat's getting into your eyes and you're seething probably with anger and frustration. and you're silent and you're counting every step until you can get to this 1 mile and you can finally be done with this. And then finally you see it. There's the 1 mile marker, and you get to that point where you finally get to the end and you're carrying this 100-pound pack on your back, and you drop it with a thud and you think, that's it, I'm done. And then this is the moment where Jesus looks at you and says, why don't you pick it up and walk 1 more mile with that soldier? See, that moment, that's the second mile moment. The first mile is always what you owe to someone. That you just go as far as what you kind of owe them. But the second mile, when you go the second mile with someone, that's what you offer them. And that's what Jesus is saying here. In the first mile, this is what's required of you in a relationship, in a situation. It's what expected. It's what the law demands. But the second mile, that's where the soldier, you have to imagine, if you already walked, soldiers have done this 100 times. No one's asking to go an extra mile with a soldier. So that moment, you have to imagine the person says, hey, why don't I walk another mile with you? And the soldier looks at them completely surprised, confused, befuddled, saying, wait, what? You want to walk another mile with me? Why? Why would you do that? Why are you still walking? See, here, this is where grace begins to speak louder than words. This is the moment where the unexpected gets planted into someone's heart. And I think so often this is where conversation happens. This is where the story begins to shift, where you begin to have this conversation like, why would you do that? And suddenly there's a conversation that might not have happened otherwise. That was true in this example, but it's true in our lives as well. Now, if in case you're thinking, okay, that sounds nice. That's that's impossible. How can Jesus ask me this? Jesus didn't ask us to do anything that he didn't do himself. In fact, this teaching, I think, is really a reflection of, a foreshadowing of Jesus walking the extra mile for you and for me. Because Jesus carried something. He carried a cross, not a Roman pack. And he went literally the extra mile to a hill called Calvary, where he was beaten, betrayed, burdened with a cross that he didn't deserve. Certainly wasn't his fault. He was mocked. He was abandoned. And there he would die for the very people that he came to save. And he was sentenced to death by the very people that he came to save. And Jesus could have said, hey, wow, Father, I've gone far enough with these people. I have tried to show them love. I've healed people. I've tried to do exactly what you've called me to do, Father. They have rejected me. They don't seem to care. They don't deserve my forgiveness. But instead, Jesus went further. In fact, Jesus didn't settle the score. He rewrote the story because he was willing to walk that extra mile for you and for me. The cross is the ultimate second mile. It's a reminder every time we think about it that Jesus is willing to forgive us. And so how can we forgive others in our lives? So let me just think back here where we've been. I've gone far enough. We've all been there. I've gone far enough. We reflected on the truth that Jesus went further, and he asked us to do that. But here's the real question as we get to the end of this, is that will we walk with him? Will we walk with Jesus? And that's the last thing that I want to see, is that I will walk with him. What does that look like? What does that mean? I was thinking back this past week to a handful of times I've done a 100-mile bike ride, what's known as a century. And whenever you have done 100 miles, especially if you've been pushing it to try to keep your pace up or whatever, you get to this end of the 100 miles and you're like a mile or two away and you are dying. Your legs are burning and you're looking at the finish line at the end of that 100 miles and you're thinking, I cannot wait until I'm done. And then whenever you finally get to the end, you want to get off that bike, you just collapse into a ball and you don't want to do anything. And you want to just eat a bunch of food and just relax for a couple days. And you're like, I'm done. I did it. I'm at the finish line. Maybe you've experienced that if you've done a race or a run or something like that, or something really hard. And so imagine the moment then where you finally get to the finish line and Jesus looks at you and he says, okay, you did it. Now get on your bike and do 100 more miles. Honestly, that's exactly what it feels like sometimes when Jesus is asking of this in our own relationships. We've forgiven someone. Again, we've already extended kindness in our lives. We've been faithful. We've tried. We've done our part. And we think that we've made it to the finish line. God, I've done enough. I've done my thing. I've loved this person enough. I've extended enough grace, haven't I? And then Jesus in this moment says, now go again. And if that's where you are, I get it. This is not an easy thing to do. This is a challenging message. Now, here's the truth. I don't think any of us are probably going to have to carry a Roman soldier's pack on our back for a mile this week, but I think every one of us has a chance to go a second mile this week. All of us have second mile moments, second mile opportunities in our lives, and that'll be true this week for you as well. And so what does that look like? It might be reaching out to someone who hasn't reached out to you. It might be being patient with a child who's just tested your grace and your patience again and again. It might be forgiving a spouse, a sibling. They just keep falling short. They're not living up to what you think they should live up to, and you just have to say, it's okay. Maybe it's praying for someone who's wounded you, as Jesus asks us to in this passage. Or maybe it's like, I'm going to serve, maybe it might be, I'm serving at the church again, even though I haven't felt like I've been thanked enough to do that. I still want to go the extra mile. Sometimes the second mile is dramatic. Sometimes it's a big dramatic thing. But more often, whenever we're walking the second mile, it's quiet, it's costly, and maybe no one else even knows that you're doing it for someone.